What's up, YouTube fans? Today we're doing a comparison of the FansToys spoiler with the DX9 Montana, both G1 versions of Breakdown. So these did come out around the same time. This came out in late 2018 and this came out in 2019. They were kind of revealed at the same time, but the DX9s decided to start their set with Montana, whereas FansToys started their set with Road King. By the way, this was provided to me by Reclaw198, his username, or he also goes by Mike Walker, and he has his own channel where he does some animations. That'll be linked in the description below, so you can check that out. But thank you for providing this, Mike. So we're going to do this comparison. This isn't going to involve the X-Transbots version of Breakdown. I've already done a comparison with that and this, so we're going to leave that out. But without further ado, let's get into this comparison and see how these two compare. So we're going to start off with the accessories as always, and they both come with basically two extra accessories. So both have the gun. The FansToys is obviously painted. DX9 is not painted, but they're both sculpted well. The FansToys come with the extra face sculpt, which I really like. I love this yelling face. And then the DX9 comes with this thing, probably from that one time, that one episode. I don't even know what it is. I don't even know how to use it, honestly. I'm just going to set that aside. But it does come with that accessory. But then there's an odd thing, and DX9 comes with all these parts. So I wasn't sure whether it came with this by default or whether Mike asked for it. And I asked him, you know, did this come with it? And he said yes. And I said, well, why is it in the box? And he said, well, they give you replacement parts because they had some issues with paint. And they want you to have these parts in case you have an issue with paint, you can replace the part. So is this an accessory? It's hard for me to say that. I don't know if it's an accessory or not. But, I mean, it's a nice thought to give you these extra parts if something goes wrong. And we're going to talk a little bit more about paint when we get to paint, because that's a whole nother story. But since they give you this, I mean, it's very hard to call it an accessory, but I'm going to have to give accessories to DX9 just because they included this in the box. You get more in the box. All right, next we're going to talk about the Sculpt. So Sculpt, again, is usually a very subjective thing. We'll put the G1 cartoon there so you can take a look. And obviously, you know, you have to determine for yourself, but it's very close. They both hit the cartoon pretty well. The thing that stands out to me is probably the face and the head sculpt. So the DX9 has a bigger helmet, whereas the face on the FansToys look a little more modern and mature. This looks like a younger version of Breakdown. And that's kind of a running theme with FansToys, is their figures tend to look more mature or older, just in terms of age. They tend to look older. And that's what it is here. And for some reason, for me personally, that appeals to me. There's some other things about the sculpt that I prefer, even though they're not tune accurate, which is why I always put the tune there so you can decide for yourself. But some of this stuff, so for example, instead of just having it molded, they've actually painted it. They've got some detail here on the chest where there's a translucent piece and some detail behind that. The DX9 is just this blue plastic, but this is more accurate. This doesn't exist in the show. Other little things, you know, there's little details here and there. You know, for example, on the arms on DX9, you got some kibble and stuff sticking out. The FansToys arms are much cleaner. But then you go to the back, you do have a little bit of kibble here on the back of the FansToys arms. So, and then you got this kibble here on the back of the legs, whereas the DX9 legs. So they're really close. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, you know, back and forth on these two, where I could say, you know, I could pick either one. But for my personal preferences, I think the sculpt of the FansToys hits it better for me. So I'm going to pick FansToys for Sculpt. Next, we're going to talk about paint. So just as a surprise to me, this is actually painted much more than I thought it was. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to talk about some issues. So one of the issues with the DX9 is, well, first of all, it's not painted fully. The FansToys figure is painted on head to toe in every spot. The only spot I don't think that is not painted, or I'm not sure, are these hood pieces here. Someone told me they are painted with this metallic red, but I'm not quite sure. So other than that, the thing is fully painted. On the DX9, this leg piece is not painted, and then this side piece is not painted. It's just more of a glossy plastic. The rest of it is, like all of these parts are all painted. The thighs, the crotch area, the arms, the chest, the face, that's all painted. So, you know, I'll give them credit for putting a good amount of paint on this figure compared to what they usually do. We'll talk about the articulation a little bit later. But for me, one of the issues is the quality of the paint. And so I'm going to try to get in closer so you can see some of the issues. But you can see there's some paint defects there. This is one of the worst ones here, right on the front of the foot, which is very visible right there. And so I asked Mike, who I got this figure from, you know, is this how he came? Did he have these paint issues? And he said, yeah, you know, this figure has some paint issues, and that's why they gave you these replacement parts. So that's kind of strange to me. Like, you know, if you knew you had paint issues, why didn't you just fix the paint issues before you released the figure? But I guess it's nice that they gave you this just in case. Now, is this better paint? I'm not sure. I mean, if you take a look, you know, it doesn't have the cleanest lines on this replacement one either. The original is also kind of hit and miss when it comes to the paint. There's some out of the line stuff and some. It's not bad. Don't get me wrong. It's just it's not perfect. So I'm not really sure if they, you know, what they did to improve on the second version of the parts. But because it's got those paint issues and it's not fully painted like the FansToys, we're gonna give paint to FansToys. Next, we're gonna talk about the build. And this is kind of what sets FansToys apart, is when you pick this up and you feel it. And that's one thing I can't convey in these videos, is how does it feel to hold these figures? How does it feel to play with them, articulate them, transform them, manipulate them? And, you know, having held both of these, it just feels better. The FansToys just feels more solid. It doesn't feel hollow. Yes, it's got more die cast. And in fact, you know, let's give you a weight here. So this FansToys figure comes to 11 ounces. 11 ounces, a little over 11 ounces. The DX9 figure comes to 7 ounces. So definitely a difference in weight, and most of that's due to the die-cast parts that the FansToys has. But die-cast alone doesn't make the build better, right? It's how does it hold up? And after transforming this a couple times, I definitely feel like this feels better in hand. It's just a solid figure. It poses really well. It's got nice heft at the bottom, so you get some nice poses. You know, here's one of the things, and we'll talk about this when we get to articulation, but that's a build issue, right? The fact that they use die cast back here, but then they use plastic up here, and so the die cast is heavier, and also they used a pin to hold it on. Because they used a pin, the plastic tends to bend. You know, when you connect plastic to metal, it's always an issue. So that's the kind of stuff I mean. And then like these ankles kind of don't feel great, and it's kind of hard to get him to pose. He tends to do that. You got to fix it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to articulation. But that's the kind of stuff I mean. It just doesn't feel as good. So we're going to give build to FansToys. For me, that's a no-brainer, clear winner. Okay, next we're going to talk about the articulation. And to do this, we're actually going to go through the articulation for both. It's going to go pretty rapidly because I don't want to waste too much time doing this. But the head is on a rotating swivel for the FansToys. You get up to there. You get down to there. The arms are on a ratcheted rotating joint, and it gets up to there on that joint. There's a little bit of hindrance with this, but you can move it out of the way. You get a rotation at the bicep, double jointed elbow, rotation at the wrist. Typical FansToys fingers with two joints, one at the base and one at this knuckle. And then the thumb is on a ball joint. You get a waist rotation. You get an ab crunch. It is locked in, so you got to unlock it from back here. But then you can get it all the way over and lock it back in. You get a rotation at the thigh. Open up these hip skirts, you get it up to there on a ratchet, back to here, hindered by that, and then out to the side with a friction joint. The legs are a little bit heavy, but it does hold. Double jointed knee gets it all the way up to there. Ankle tilt that way, and this way, up to there. For the DX9, you get, again, a rotating swivel. Let's just bring it up a little bit. Goes up to there, down to there. It's a little bit hindered because the bottom of this head is squared off. You get the shoulders up to there and then up to there, so really nice movement on the shoulder. Rotation at the bicep, double jointed elbow all the way up to there, just like FansToys. Rotation at the wrist. You get this movement here, which is nice, but then it also kind of gets in the way as you're trying to pose the figure, because it sometimes does that when you don't want it to. There's no way to lock it. It does feel a little bit like a Takara hand, because it's got the bent pointer finger. You know, he's crooked finger guy, and then he's got the single articulation there at the thumb, just like the Takara figures. And then you got that. You get a rotation at the waist and ab crunch all the way up to there, which is pretty much similar to the FansToys. It doesn't lock in. Yeah, it doesn't lock in. And in fact, these two pieces back here, which are part of the transformation, actually hinder it from going all the way down. You can see there's a little bit of gap there. I've checked that, and these will not go in anymore. That's all they'll go, without, you know, breaking something. So it looks like there's some kind of tolerance issue there. Hip skirt, single hip skirt opens up there, goes up to there, back to there, hindered by this. I prefer the 2 hip skirts versus 1. I don't really like when they do that. You've got friction joints this way, but then you got a soft ratchet this way. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Single jointed knee gets you a 90-degree bend. Ankle tilt a little bit this way, a lot more that way. And then you get a pivot here, although it's a little bit irritating because you got to make sure you've got this heel down when you're placing it down on the ground. But because, I mean, very clearly to me, because the FansToys has just more points of articulation and moves a little bit further, we're going to give articulation to FansToys. All right, now I'm going to talk about the engineering and transformation. So both of these figures are done very differently, and you can just tell that by just the where things end up. So for example, the lights on the back of the car end up on the top of his shoulders, whereas on the DX9 they end up on the backpack facing forward. And then there's some other things. You can see where the wheels end up, where the doors end up, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely different takes on design. You know, they're both, you know, very unique transformations. But one of the things I really like about the FansToys is the cleanliness, how they got it to just look so clean. There's very little kibble. And when you look at the DX9, there's a lot of stuff hanging out, especially in the arms. You got a lot of stuff up here. Down here, you got the doors kind of sticking out. On the FansToys, they chose to put that on the back. Although, you know, I could argue these two pieces are a little bit kibbly. But then when you look at the DX9, you can see it's just a bunch of mess back here. Things are kind of sticking out. And I know you don't really look at the back of the figure, but just as a whole, overall, the FansToys just feels a lot cleaner, a lot more impressive in terms of how they got the arms and legs to be so clean. So I'm going to give engineering to FansToys. However, transformation, the FansToys one is definitely more complex. There's a lot of little pieces, especially where you have to swivel the waist. There's some pieces in there. I have seen people actually break that. I haven't broken mine, but that is one of the more irritating pieces. There's some stuff with the legs that's a little bit harder, especially if, you know, you haven't done this too many times. And it's a little challenging to get that. The DX9 is a very, very simple transformation. I don't know if I call it fun, but it's easy and it's somewhat self-explanatory. I didn't even look up a video for this guy. I was able to transform this pretty much on my own with no video, no help, not watching any of the reviews. For FansToys, you got to watch a video. You know, you're asking for trouble if you don't, because there's some really complex parts, especially in the legs. So I'm going to give transformation to DX9 because it's fairly intuitive, fairly self-explanatory, especially if you're the kind of person that likes to try to figure out the puzzle. You know, you could probably do it here. So they're going to split engineering for FansToys and transformation for DX9. Here we have them both in their alt modes, and both pretty good looking. Definitely some differences in how they present. I left everything open just so you could see kind of the features you get. So they both have opening doors. Nothing inside. They both have robot bits in there, so you can't put any figures in there or anything. They both have opening headlights. They did do them a little bit differently. The DX9 has a painted silver, whereas the FansToys has that translucent clear plastic, which I think it looks a lot more realistic. And then the FansToys has the little extra here. It's got that opening hood, trunk actually. It's not a hood on the Lamborghini. And then on the back, you get a little different here. The FansToys has got the translucent lights, where the DX9 has the painted lights. This is probably more accurate, but this just looks nicer. It looks a little more professional. And then they both have the exhaust down there, the quad exhaust, which is accurate to the Countach. I do think they both look good, but scale is part of the issue on these guys. And the DX9 is obviously much bigger. So let's take a couple of quick measurements just to show you. So the FansToys is 5.5 inches. The DX9 is 6 and I would say 1/8 inches long. As far as width, DX9 is 2 7/8. FansToys 2 1/4. And then height-wise, also different. And the DX9 is 1 3/4, or a little shy of 1 3/4. FansToys is 1 inch. So every dimension is bigger, which is not a big problem in and of itself. But then when you bring in the other figures from Masterpiece line, it starts to look a little too big. And I think that's where FansToys magic comes into play. The fact that they're able to do this, I guess what you call mass shifting, right? Where it goes from a smaller size car to a larger size robot, because these are obviously, you know, it's much bigger in robot mode than the standard Autobot car. And there's a lot of question around that, you know, should it be taller? So I'm going to put an image up here of the scale chart with the smoke. I think I have smoke screen. So I'll put a smoke screen and the Stunticons in that picture, and you'll see that in the Sunbow chart, Breakdown is definitely bigger than the Autobot cars. But as a car, he should be about the same size, because he's still a car in the reality of that show. So I think that's really a lot of magic here. The FansToys were able to do this, you know, have a car the same size, but a robot mode a lot bigger. And this one just feels too big to me. The scale is just off. It doesn't scale with the rest. One feature they also both have is the guns. So you can mount the FansToys gun back here. And the DX9, you just pull down the handle and you get this little tab there. And it's supposed to fit right here, but I believe there's just too much paint in that hole. So again, another tolerance thing. I can't get in there. This is not my figure, so I don't want to force it, but should fit on the top there. So just because of the features and because of the look and the general feel, you know, it's a little more solid. And then actually some of the paint, I talked about some of the paint issues that continues on in this mode. There's some paint issues here and there where there's paint missing, or, you know, not quite straight, or, you know, right here you can kind of see some sloppiness. Whereas the FansToys paint is really dead on. It's really, you know, pretty impressive. So we're going to give the alt mode to FansToys. So the final factor here is cost. So the FansToys at the retail release was $105. The DX9 at retail was $100. So by $5, DX9 wins the cost category. Final thoughts wise, you can see the score there. And FT pretty much killed it here. And yeah, I mean, I'm not that surprised, honestly. I mean, this is a really good figure. And it's not even close, honestly, in my mind. And there's some things I didn't even talk about. So, for example, this gun, it doesn't peg in. It just sits in the hand. It's loose. Getting him in this pose was actually kind of irritating because his feet are sort of, they don't cooperate. His legs sort of get in their own way. So as you're trying to rotate, and I think that's probably why, oh, geez, he's got more paint issues. I think that's probably why he's got those paint issues, because, you know, he gets in his own way. And you can see he's falling. It's because of the feet, and those feet can't be tightened. They're not on screws, so I can't tighten them. So you can just see it just doesn't look as good when you try to set up the same pose. So for me, clear winner here is FansToys, even as individual bot. Now, when it comes to combined mode, we don't know how these are going to pan out, right? We haven't seen FansToys produce any kind of combiner. DX9, we also haven't seen them produce a combiner. So we don't know. So with that being said, choose what you like. My personal preference, and based on the score, FansToys is going to take it from me. But I do want to thank Mike for sending this out to me. I got a chance to look at it. I can't buy every figure out there, so it's really good and helpful when fans send me figures to do comparisons like this. So thank you once again, Reclaw198. That's really it for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.